It is June 30th, 1908. You feel the ground rumble beneath your feet, not just rumble, shake. Windows on houses shatter, people are knocked off their feet and thrown through the air. The noise grows until it is deafening. Then you look up and see the most terrifying sight imaginable. The sky is filled with bright light and fire, as if the very heavens themselves are splitting open and tearing apart. Then everything goes silent. When you turn to go back inside, you see that every single tree around you has been leveled in a perfect ring, all facing directly away from the epicenter of the explosion. You survived the blast, but now you have questions. What was that? Where did it come from? And why are there no bodies? Because no one else is anywhere to be seen. This is the story of Tunguska, the biggest explosion in modern history and what actually happened out there in the middle of Siberia. On June 30th, 1908, a freakishly hot summer day in Siberia, Russia, the earth shook violently. It was felt as far as 800 kilometers away in Yekaterinburg. People were thrown to the ground, windows shattered and doors were torn off their hinges. For some brief moments, the sky glowed an eerie red color, before turning an even more frightening shade of bright blue. The terrified witnesses later described it as the sun shining 10 times brighter than normal. So, what exactly had happened out there in the desolate wilderness of Siberia? It wasn't until 3 years after the event that the first expedition set out to find out. But when they arrived, they found nothing. No impact crater, no trace of any object, and no answers. Today, scientists still do not know what exploded in the skies over Tunguska in 1908. This video is part of the Forgotten Chapters series. Each week, we bring you the most amazing stories from history that have been long forgotten and lost to time. Now, let's begin. When the Siberian winter snows melt, rivers form and flow through the vast and endless landscape. One such river is the Podkamennaya Tunguska. In 1908, the Tunguska River flowed through an area of dense and thick forest, so thick that it had never before been disturbed by human hands. The area was so wild and untouched that the river got its name from the local Evenki tribe, meaning river of the stone pillars, referring to the massive rocks that lay scattered along its banks. Today, however, the name is synonymous with one of the most devastating natural phenomena ever witnessed by man. On June 30th, 1908, between 7 and 10 a.m. local time, a cataclysmic explosion occurred above the Tunguska River. It is estimated that the blast had the equivalent force of 10 to 12 megatons of TNT, roughly 300 times the destructive power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Eyewitnesses claimed that the shockwave of the blast knocked them off their feet and threw them through the air. Houses literally blew to pieces, brick by brick, and cattle were thrown several dozen meters into the air before crashing to the ground, dead. But the true horror of the blast became evident as news of the event slowly trickled into the outside world. Reports told of an intense blue light filling the sky, seen as far away as Europe. And then the destruction. A forest, the size of 2,500 square kilometers, leveled in a perfect radial pattern around the epicenter. All of the trees were knocked down, all facing outwards, away from the center of the explosion. The forest had literally been blown to pieces. It is vital to remember that this was 1908. There were no mobile phones, no internet, and newspapers were the only way information could spread. By July, the story of a mysterious blue light filling the sky and leveling entire forests was reaching every corner of the globe. But what had caused this apocalyptic scene? Well, that is where things get strange. The answer is simply this: nobody knows. Not a single person alive today can say with any certainty what blew up in the sky over Tunguska. Even 114 years later, the truth is still unknown. To truly understand the enigma of Tunguska, it helps to imagine just how remote the area was back in 1908. The nearest town was over 1,000 kilometers away. The wasteland of untamed Siberia was basically uninhabited. The closest railway line was a full 650 kilometers away. In fact, it wasn't until 5 years after the event that the first rescue party ever made it to the site. That would be Leonid Kulik, a geologist who led 3 expeditions to the area between 1927 and 1929. After painstakingly locating the approximate epicenter of the explosion, he began searching for 2 things: an impact crater and fragments of the unknown object. What he found instead was even stranger, an area of flat, featureless land and thousands of trees lying in a radial pattern. Most had been snapped cleanly, as if cut down by an invisible blade. Strangely, none had been burned. Kulik scoured the area, hoping to discover a meteorite fragment, something to indicate what it was that had struck the Earth. He found nothing. He eventually gave up, believing that whatever had caused the explosion was made of pure iron. If this were true, it would make sense. An iron meteor exploding in the atmosphere would not leave behind any fragments, as the intense heat would vaporize the metal. But there was another anomaly. Meteorites burn as they pass through the atmosphere. But aside from charring the bark of some of the trees, nothing had caught fire. The Tunguska Event was an explosion that left behind no traces. It was like a gigantic bomb that vanished into thin air. There are many theories, but ultimately we cannot prove any of them. That is the frustrating reality of what happened over Tunguska. Before we go into the leading theories, please take a second to show your support by liking this video. Now, let's continue. In recent decades, the leading theory among experts is that some kind of cosmic body entered the Earth's atmosphere and exploded. This is known as an airburst, an event similar to a meteor, except the object does not strike the Earth but detonates mid-air. Could an asteroid or comet have exploded over Tunguska? Well, it certainly makes sense. The most common objects to enter the atmosphere are meteorites, and an exploding comet or asteroid would explain the explosion without leaving behind any large fragments. However, it also presents several difficulties. Firstly, no one saw a fireball or a bright light in the sky, which is unusual for an airburst. Secondly, the explosion would have released unimaginable amounts of dust and debris into the atmosphere, which was never observed. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, if this were an asteroid, why have we never found any fragments? Search teams combing through the debris field after the explosion found no evidence that any fragments ever reached the ground, not even small pebbles. If the asteroid was made of iron, perhaps it disintegrated completely. But that leaves us with the question, where is it? A cosmic body that exploded with the force of 10 megatons of TNT shouldn't just disappear. As for a cometary origin, it is perhaps more plausible, as comets are largely made up of volatile ice that would vaporize during re-entry. However, comets are much less frequent, and we have no record of any comet passing through the region at the time. Unfortunately, the Tunguska event remains an enigma. We simply don't have enough evidence to prove any of our theories. Now, unfortunately, we have to move on to the wacky theories, the ones that stretch the limits of scientific possibility, the ones that make mainstream scientists roll their eyes. And I'm afraid that what happens next will fall into this category. But before we do, please remember to show your support. Now, let's continue. One of the more outlandish ideas put forward over the years is that a small black hole passed through the Earth. Now I know what you're thinking. Black holes don't just pass through planets, but you have to remember that this black hole wouldn't have been very big. In fact, it would have been tiny, only a few miles in diameter. Black holes come in all shapes and sizes, and according to NASA, there are millions upon millions of them scattered throughout the galaxy. Some are the size of mountains, others are the size of entire solar systems. If a small black hole had somehow entered the Earth's atmosphere, it would have ripped through the air and rocketed towards the core. But as it passed through the planet, it would have released an enormous amount of energy, enough to level entire forests. Once it exited on the other side, it would have disappeared into outer space, leaving behind no evidence of its existence. While fascinating, there is little evidence to support this idea. Another popular theory is that a UFO exploded over the Tunguska River. According to reports from the early 20th century, sightings of strange airships and flying machines were at an all-time high, with rumors of German Zeppelins and mysterious airships floating around the globe. It is easy to believe that one such craft may have met its demise over Siberia. But again, there is little concrete evidence to support this claim. And finally, we have the military theory, the idea that some kind of secret weapon or unknown energy source exploded over Tunguska. Of course, this was 1908, long before the days of nuclear weapons. So what kind of energy could have caused so much destruction? We simply do not know. So what do you think? What caused the Tunguska event? Let us know in the comments below. For now, though, that is all we know. In 1908, the world stood still. The sky tore open and the earth trembled as a force of unimaginable power ripped through the heavens. In a matter of seconds, it changed the landscape forever. Yet today, more than 100 years later, it remains a mystery. What caused the Tunguska event? No one knows. But that is part of what makes it so fascinating. It's a reminder that even in the 21st century, our knowledge of the universe is limited, and there are still things that we simply do not understand. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more videos like this. And don't forget to join our community to suggest future topics and leave your feedback. Until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring the unknown.